So in this video, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to use a limited palette of black, red, yellow, and white, and I'm going to paint a little poppy pattern, a little design that I'm going to repeat vertically and diagonally to make a pattern that I'm going to use potentially in the background of my paintings. So for this little painting, I'm working in my sketchbook on a watercolor paper, and I'm painting with gouache. Now, I have barely been painting with gouache actually, and I've always really loved the effect of gouache, so I decided a few weeks back that I would get myself a set of gouache paints for this sketchbook project that I'm working on these days. And I would just, try to have fun and see how I found it and what kind of interesting effects and just paintings that I could create using this new medium. I think it's really fun to try something different. So I've been working with oil paint forever and I really love it, and I think I'm always going to work with oils on majority of my paintings, but I found that for the sketchbook project I wanted to try a medium that is quite versatile, that has a lot of different opportunities when it comes to texture and layering and transparency. But I didn't want to work with traditional watercolors because I've done that a lot in the past as well. I wanted to challenge myself with a new medium, so that's why I decided to try working with gouache. Now, I have to say, painting with gouache, it's a lot more challenging than I thought it would be. It has definitely taken a little bit to get used to, and I think I'm still trying to get used to it. One of the really interesting things about gouache is that if you paint light values and colors, these tend to dry darker, and vice versa. If you paint really dark colors and values, these tend to dry lighter. So you naturally end up in this mid-tone region of color and values. But I think that can also be a quite beautiful effect, especially if you're trying to paint paintings that are a lot more harmonious. Now, because I'm going to use this pattern in the background, most likely, of a painting, if I like it, I do want it to be quite harmonious. So I think that gouache is actually quite perfect in that sense. I think that if you have a pattern or a design and you want to use that in the background and there's a lot of contrast and a lot of things that are going on, then this can really detract from whatever is in front of the pattern. So in my paintings for the last few years, I've been working with combining two different artistic styles, which is my classical, traditional, realistic style with these Art Nouveau inspired patterns. And I really love the contrast between the slightly more simplified, flat, sometimes even quite abstract shapes with the more realistic three-dimensional form of the animals and birds, which are the subject matters that I've been predominantly working on. Now, usually I've just been making these patterns from a pencil sketch, so I just sketched out the pattern that I would like with pencil, and then I've taken a photo of that and I have uploaded it into my computer, and I've been working on it digitally and just experimented a lot with different color combinations and lines and rhythms and everything to create a pattern design that I love. But I've been thinking for a long time about making patterns all the way from scratch. So basically just spend some time on the design in an analog way and not in a digital way. I find that I spend so much time on the computer anyways, so I want to sort of outsource as much as I can of my creative process now to analog, in real life, hand to paper, brush, paint, all of that good stuff, and spend as much time as possible just creating and being in that process, which is why I've also started the sketchbook project, where I try to make these quicker, smaller sketches that I don't necessarily intend to become anything, but just to spend time creating and hopefully also just to discover maybe new ways of doing things, new ideas that I wouldn't have necessarily, or most likely even, come across if I was just always painting larger paintings and paintings that, are meant to be in a show or meant to go on my website or, meant to be a finished product. One of the really interesting and I think inspiring things about creating patterns and to work in this way is that you don't really know the end result before you are finished, in the sense that this design that I'm working on here, it is meant to be repeated in different ways. So I don't really know exactly what it's going to look like. I can kind of get a vague idea, obviously, but usually I get some really fun surprises when I start to mirror the design and put it next to each other in a larger design. So you never really know exactly what it's going to look like before it's finished. A few things that I am thinking about, however, when I am making a pattern is that I'm always thinking about the fact that it will be mirrored and repeated. So especially along the edges of the design, I find that it's really important to think about how you place different elements and shapes so that when you start mirroring and adding things next to each other, it needs to sort of connect in a natural way. The design needs to have a way of continuing without it looking sort of unlikely or unnatural. So as you can see, I have two leaves on each side of this design. I have this very sort of general leaf shape in the left corner, and then I have a poppy leaf on the right top corner. So here I've sort of split the leaf in a way that I hope will create a natural continuation of the design. Of course, you don't really know exactly how it's going to look until it's finished and you start mirroring it. And there are also, of course, things that can be done on the computer, like digitally later on, to make it connect maybe better. But I like to think about this as much as possible to make the continuation seamless and yeah, just flow better. And then you also have a lot more, I find, possibilities of different ways that you can add the design in different directions to create interesting patterns. So another tip whenever I'm making a pattern is to work with a limited palette. Now, in this pattern, I'm working with yellow, red, white, and black, which is your sort of standard limited palette. But you can also, choose maybe one color and just work with a limited palette in that sense. So you could maybe you think that you would like a completely green pattern, and then you would use a black, white, yellow, and blue, or you would use a couple of different greens with the white and yellow, or same if you would like a red pattern. You just basically create the whole pattern from these 3 or 4 colors. And that is naturally, I find, going to tie all the colors together and make the whole image just a lot more harmonious. So I have to say, for me, creating these patterns are just such a meditative exercise. It really just enables me to let my mind flow and enter this zone of creation where time just goes by so quickly. And I think it's because it's so straightforward in a lot of sense. It's very simple shapes and blocks of color compared to what I usually paint and the more realistic aspects of my work, where I need to focus a lot more and constantly analyze the form and light and all those aspects of what I'm trying to bring to life on the canvas. These patterns, on the other hand, they're mainly about color and also, of course, value, because you kind of have to decide on a value range that you want to work with. But I find predominantly the patterns are about color and color combinations, and of course rhythms and compositions as well. But when you sort of have that figured out, which is something that happens very early on, then you can just let your mind wander as you're filling in the colors on all the different shapes. It's a little bit like having a coloring book, like when were a child. And one of the things that I think these patterns that I've been creating lately has really helped me to do is just to create more for creating's sake, just to let my mind wander and to have a moment where I am completely present, where I don't have anything else going on. I really love just sitting and painting these, and sometimes I don't even, listen to music or podcasts or anything. I just sit in complete silence and I just let my mind wander, and I actually feel quite rested afterwards. So I think if you want to do something that is quite, calming, and you want to just like de-stress, I would also really recommend making these patterns. What is really fun about these patterns also is that they can be super simple, and it's really interesting to see how really simple shapes and quite abstract shapes as well can become something very beautiful and very decorative when it's being put together and mirrored. And all of a sudden, all of these simple shapes, when they're given this repetitive rhythm, they become really complex. And it looks like there's a lot of pre contemplation when, a lot of the time it really isn't that much planning that goes into creating a pattern. Sometimes there is, but a lot of the times I just start with an idea of maybe a certain color theme or a certain flower or plant that I would like to include in the pattern, and then I'm exploring as I go what could be a good fit for that topic or theme. One thing which is a little bit different about this pattern compared to a lot of my other patterns is that I usually like to have shapes and sizes that are a little bit more varied. This one is a little bit more repetitive within the original design. The two puppies that are going to make out the pattern, they are quite similar in size, even though the color is different. So this just happened. The two puppy buds as well are also quite similar in shape and size. So I like to be a little bit more varied because I find that then the pattern becomes a little bit more interesting. So at the end here, I'm just adding on a few different slightly darker accents and notes just to make certain areas pop. But I'm keeping the design on this fairly simple. I mean, the poppies are probably the most detailed things on this, but all the leaves and also these puppy buds, I want them to be very simple and not attract too much attention, because my intention for this is for it to be a background design. Okay, so this is the pattern finished. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a photo and then I'm going to upload it into Canva, which is the program that I use for a lot of my editing stuff, and to make digital sketches of my paintings, and yeah, just overall a great editing software, which I am in no way sponsored by, but I think it's a great program and I've been using it for years and years and years. So if you're looking for a really easy and affordable design tool, then I would really recommend Canva. You can also use the free version. It has slightly less features, but you can also do a lot of great designing in the free version as well. Okay, so here I am in Canva, and I've just uploaded the picture, and it's really important when you take a photo of the design that you have it as flat as possible and as straight as possible from above, so you don't get any weird distortions on the image, because then that's going to make it harder to mirror and to work with the design when you are trying to create your pattern. So I'm just resizing my pattern a little bit to make it center. And then what I do is I just copy the image and then I just start to mirror it in all these different directions, which is, I think, so much fun. It's so much fun to, just see like all the different possibilities that you have. Um, just going to make it a little bit smaller so that it fits on the page, the whole pattern. Then I just copy it and then I'm going to try and flip it again. And as you can see, now we have slightly different variation of the pattern. So you can play around and see, what happens if you start to place all of these little pattern squares next to each other in different directions. I find that a lot of the times it's really cool to see it multiplied like many times. Then you start to really see some interesting rhythms, and it's almost like you get patterns within patterns or something like that. Like, it's really, really interesting, I find, to see how you can work with the rhythm of what you've created and the design of what you created. So I think here it's only, playing around with it until you find something that you really love and then see how you could potentially use it. I find usually I have an idea, I have a project in mind, but for this specific pattern, I just wanted to play around and see what happened. I love puppies, so I wanted to try and make a puppy pattern. I have been playing around with puppies before in my patterns as well. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed seeing this little video of how I go about creating patterns. Now, there are so many things that I could have talked about, but I tried to keep this short and sweet. And most likely I will make more videos like this in the future. So if you would like to see more videos like this from my sketchbook and also larger projects that I'm working on in the studio and tips and tricks about oil paint, which is my predominant medium, which I work with the most, then definitely follow along by subscribing so you don't miss a new video. If you check out the description below, there will be some links for you if you would like to find out more about me and my art, and if you would like to try Canva for yourself. Bye!